Welcome back to the Wingspan Podcast, Episode 7. I'm Doug Barak, joined by my co-host Chris Harlan of NetsDaily and our special guest. Our guest is an NBA writer for the NetsDaily, host of the Culture Podcast, and a Fordham graduate.
We welcome to the Wingspan Podcast, Billy. Thank you for taking some time out of your night to join Doug and I. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
No problem, man. No problem.
So, Billy, to start it off, I just wanted to ask, when did you realize you wanted to pursue a career in sports?
Well, throughout my life growing up, I always had a real passion for sports, played multiple sports growing up. And once I realized I wasn't able to make it in a career in any of the sports as a professional athlete, I think the next best thing to stay close to the game was to find some way to work within sports. There's a couple different avenues I've thought about. Now I'm thinking towards more of a sports agency route, potentially. As of now, obviously, I'm writing and reporting and doing all of that, but I'm thinking long-term in the sports agency side of things, potentially front office role. But yeah, so I always just loved sports and wanted to find a way to stay close to the game, just despite not being able to play it.
That's great to hear, man.
That's great to hear. And then can you just talk a little about your journey to where you got to where you are today? So high school, kind of going to Fordham, your time there, your sports media position, your first one, or any internship, your first internship?
Yeah, so I went to Fordham University. One of the reasons I decided to go there because it has a very good broadcasting reputation and has their own radio station, one of the better college radio stations across the country. So that was big for me. I also wanted to stay in the New York area. Obviously, having the New York market, I thought it was beneficial for making connections and internship opportunities, as you mentioned. Probably the first internship I had, aside from all the stuff I did in my school's radio station, was for Westwood One, which is national radio home of the NFL, the Super Bowl. They do stuff like that. They do the Olympics, so many other different things that they broadcast. So it was a good experience there, getting to know a lot of producers there and some of the broadcasters that would come into the studio and stuff like that. So that was kind of a good basis to get a production experience. And then I got so much experience doing stuff on air for my radio station. I rose up to be the assistant sports manager my senior year there. So I got a lot of experience doing everything throughout, whether it's production, on air, reporting in the field. So it gave me a good kind of well-rounded grasp of the industry.
Good, that's good. And then you obviously talked about staying in the New York area. Did you ever look into going into any colleges along that West Coast, down south, or anything like that?
You know, I didn't want to go too far. I'd probably say I was down to the top 3 schools that I was thinking about when I was initially making my college applications. Syracuse was another one. They're also very good for broadcasting and all of that. But I didn't really love the idea of going 4.5 hours all the way up north and deal with the snow all throughout the year. But I definitely thought about Syracuse. And then Penn State was another school. I had some family that was going there at the time. My cousin's boyfriend, they actually met at Penn State. He was on the football team, a captain at the time. So kind of had that whole rah-rah experience, which I was thinking about, but I think I made the right decision deciding on Fordham.
That's good. And then in your time with Fordham, the whole reputation is that all sports media guys kind of have like a tight-knit group. So you guys know past graduates and people you know. So you can just talk a little bit about that. So like Ryan Rucco, a couple other guys.
Yeah, so one thing we're fortunate to have as Fordham students and people of WFUV, the radio station on campus, is a really good alumni base and people that really want to come back and pass it on to the next generation. So as you mentioned, Ryan Rucco, Nets announcer, ESPN announcer, does some Yankees stuff also for the YES Network. He's very good because he's not that far removed from the station. I believe he's only around 30 years old. So he kind of gives us good insight into breaking into the industry and all the stuff of that nature. Plus, he's just great with his time and a great guy to talk to. So Ryan's one of them. Michael Kay, Mike Green's another one. So many throughout the business. Spiro Ditas. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Obviously, the legendary Vince Scully. Well, I've never had the privilege to. There's a lot. The list goes on. There's so many throughout the business. So it's definitely a great tool to have and great thing to lean on as you're trying to grow up and learn your way throughout the business.
So of those alums, have any of them taken you under their wing, or have you seen them in such a way where they're your role models on a close level?
Well, so when I was there, the executive producer of the station was Bob Aarons, and he's an older gentleman. He's probably around 80 years old, but he has a lot of experience in the industry through producing, a lot of connections. He's basically taught all these guys, not all of them, but since 1997 on, so including Ryan Rucco and people of his age and younger, Tony Reale, those guys, he taught them all the same stuff he taught me. So he was both our teachers and our mentors Ryan's mentioned on multiple occasions on broadcasts of how important Bob is to him. Same thing for me. A couple of funny stories between me and him of how I initially got involved there, and he really brought me on to the staff. But yeah, definitely, he's almost like a grandfather figure to me. I was super close to my grandfather. He's actually the person who got me involved into sports most, because my dad's not really a sports fan, although he'll sit down and watch it on occasion if it's a big game with me. But my grandfather was really who got me into it. So I kind of reminded me of my grandfather a little bit, the relationship I built with Bob since he's moved on from Fordham. And he's kind of enjoying semi-retirement. But yeah, he was definitely a big role model for me and a big reason why I'm where I am today.
That's great. I mean, you kind of have a very similar relationship that Chris has with Bondi.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of great to see that parallel continues on at different schools. And one more follow-up. I thought this would be kind of fun. Were there any bloopers during your time, let's say, on the radio show or any other broadcasting there? You know, any fun stories that you wouldn't really know because it was more behind the scenes?
A lot of fun stories. Bloopers specifically, I don't know. It's tough. I mean,
so you're a true professional.
I always, I mean, obviously make mistakes, but I think I always did a good job preparing myself. That I really didn't make any mistakes that were, at least that nothing that the viewer would really, or the listener would really pick up on, if you know what I'm saying. So maybe you'll make mistakes throughout a broadcast or something happens, but you'll keep your composure and be able to spin it quick enough that people aren't really going to pick it up unless they're really critiquing you, which most people aren't. So nothing really stands on top of my head. I did have the opportunity to go down to the Super Bowl last year with a few of the other guys on the station, and we interviewed a lot of high-profile guests, Devontae Wilder. Who else? Wow, this is I'm trying to think everyone off the top of my head. Iron Eagle was down there. But a few other people. I mispronounced Christine Leahy's name. I said Kristen Leahy when I brought her on the air. And luckily we were pre-recording it to shoot it a little bit later. So I said Kristen Leahy instead of Christine Leahy. She corrected me immediately. Kind of made me embarrassed a little bit, but I had to recuperate and restart the interview. It came out well. So, but that's probably the thing off the top of my head. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And then you just named a couple of those high-profile names right there. So to get a little off topic, who are some of your favorite guys or players or kind of celebrities that you've gotten a chance to talk to or interview?
Kevin Harlan is a ball of joy. Like Kevin Harlan, I got him on the run actually at the Super Bowl. Got him for a quick interview on the phone as we're walking.
Had a great day
together.
Today.
Yeah, that was a great call. I saw that. But he's literally the same person that he is on air. And I kind of had a little connection with him from my Westwood One internship. He does some stuff for Westwood One. That's actually what he was calling it on today when he made that really fun call at the Chiefs game. But so I had a few mutual friends that we had and people I worked with. So I mentioned it to him. That automatically got me in there to kind of more casual thing with Kevin Harlan. He's just such a great guy to talk to. I mean, so many other guys. I've spoken to John Sterling, so many other guys throughout the business. I can't even think off the top of my head. You guys are hitting me with the hard-hitting questions. I should have prepared a little bit more for this. But yeah, I've had the privilege of interviewing a lot of great guys. Ozzie Smith, who else? Raleigh Fingers. I did up in Cooperstown at the All-Star game. I was down at the MLB All-Star game in Miami a few years back, where all the stars of the league got a chance to see all them and ask a few questions. So. I've been privileged to have some really awesome experiences throughout a bunch of the sports, not just basketball. I hosted a couple shows from the U.S. Open in, I believe, 3 straight years. So a lot of people from the USTA and former tennis players and so on. Nick Bollettieri, a famous trainer, I interviewed him for 3 straight years. So really awesome experiences I've had and really privileged to have had them.
You're well-traveled.
Yeah, that's a solid group right there. And then, can you just first we'll just talk a little about your Culture Pod. So when did you begin to host the Culture Podcast, and what was the inspiration kind of behind launching? Obviously, there's so many podcasts today that just concentrate around that. But can you just talk a little about kind of your podcast, what kind of went into the inspiration of launching it, your co-host, and kind of just the whole regime behind it?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to. So since graduating, I had the opportunity at school. It was just so readily available to do. We had weekly podcasts for all the different sports. And whenever I wanted to be on there, I'd basically schedule myself to be on there because I had the authority. And I'd host a podcast with a few other people on there. And I'd always have the opportunity to be on air. But after graduating, I'm still doing writing now with NetsDaily and I have the opportunity to report in the field. But I kind of didn't have the opportunity anymore to be on air as much. So that's something I missed, and I wanted to kind of create content in some
attention.
other way. A little bit of that, but also just kind of be able to spew my thoughts out. Sometimes I go on Twitter rampages and I just tweet constantly. That's because that's the only way I get my thoughts out there. So I figured
we're reading them. We're reading them all.
We're reading them, yeah.
Well, I figured one way to try and fix that is to have a podcast and kind of get my thoughts out there in that way and create content. And there's so many different people that are doing it nowadays. As you mentioned, it's tough to really grow it a ton, but we're making our way. We started just about as the offseason was kicking off, kind of expecting the Nets to have a big offseason. Figured it was a good time to start. Went back and forth on a few names. We stuck with the culture because we think
what were
that's
some of the other ones?
I don't even remember at this point, but we stuck with the culture because it was just, we felt it was so integral to what Sean Marks and the Nets have been building all these years. And that's really what ended up drawing Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, obviously with some on-court success to show as well. But that's what we decided on. I was thinking about, I always want to do one by myself, but Brooklyn's Beat mentioned that he wanted to do one. We DM'd back and forth, and it ended up working out. So we're going to keep it going. We'd like to pod a little bit more. Now past the holidays, probably going to do it a little more often. But yeah, it's definitely fun to get on there and share our thoughts.
That's great. So what do you find are the necessities when it comes to filming or recording a podcast? Because as you said, your rebirth, your renaissance of doing a pod is kind of new since college.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing that anyone could bring to anything they do on air or any content that they're creating is themselves. And that's something Ryan Rucco has repeated a lot of times, some great advice that he's gotten. The only thing that you could bring on air that's different than everyone else is yourself. So stay true to yourself, be prepared, work hard, give your own authentic takes. So that's probably the most important thing. And then from there, obviously, you need equipment, a good microphones. As much as you want to invest into it is always the best thing. But yeah, just I think being prepared and bringing your own authentic self to the table is all you can ask for.
Kind of the next thing we're going to just talk about is kind of, I guess we could just hop right in. So where do you see kind of the field of sports journalism heading? So we ask that kind of to every guest that's kind of involved with media. And some people say that it's going to primarily be on social media. Some people say that the newspaper industry may come to another rise. Billy, kind of where do you see it heading?
So I was actually talking about this with someone within the last few days. I think you're seeing more and more subscription-based monthly payment, where it's annual payments, subscription-based content. So whether you're looking at a Netflix, a Disney Plus, a Hulu, some sort of streaming service, less and less people are buying full cable packages nowadays, and people are kind of spreading their content out across multiple platforms. So they're paying maybe a $5 fee a month or a $10 fee a month or whatever it is. And then there's people out there on different other content platforms. You see this that are trying to start podcasts or different YouTube things. And people are just trying to build their revenue through different avenues. So I think that's going to continue what it's going to be, at least for the foreseeable future. If I had to put a guess out there, just different content platforms where people are putting their stuff out there and then charging a small monthly fee similar to The Athletic. I think that's probably where it's going to continue to go, because you could do podcasts where you ended up getting paid for every certain amount of viewers, but then ads have to get involved and stuff like that to be able to pay. You have to have a good platform backing you behind you. So I could see it continue to be more of a like similar to streaming services where it's going to be individual things like that.
Okay.
That's good.
So when did you begin watching the NBA? First memory of the NBA and first team growing up, and was covering the NBA always a dream focused to yours? I know you touched upon the last part earlier, but let's go even deeper.
Yeah, I'll recap it for you. So I'd say my first NBA actually wasn't my first love in terms of sport. Baseball was. I put my two sports growing up that I played most aggressively, I'd say, was baseball and soccer. Played travel for both up until through high school. So that was something I was involved with. And those are just the two sports that are most available to me, the sports that my parents signed me up for when I was young. So that's what I got into. And then towards middle school, I started to play organized basketball, and I really took a liking to that. And probably a few years before middle school, I'd say probably 2006, I started watching rather intently basketball. More so, I'd say the Nets originally. And then as the years went on, I broadened my horizon across the NBA. But I'd say that was around the time frame. I probably started watching the Yankees 2004. Probably not the best time when they lost to the Red Sox and the ALCS, and kind of went on a little bit of a drought for a few years. Not as much as you might think as a Mets fan, but a little bit of a drought. But yeah, so then my story of starting to watch the Nets was they were on Yes Network, obviously, and I was a massive Yankee fan growing up. Still am a big Yankee fan. And the Nets just happened to be on Yes, and throughout the offseason, I really didn't have any other hobby on the winters besides playing my sports, going to school, whatever, and something to watch at night. I was never really a big TV show guy. So I took a liking to basketball, which was actually third for me behind football at the time. I had started watching football a little bit earlier. So basketball I took a liking to. Watching Yes Network, I kind of developed an affinity towards the Nets. They were a lot better than the Knicks at the time, and the Nets had Vince Carter, who quickly became my favorite player. So just from that point on, I continued to watch the team, went through a few lean years. Then they acquired Darren Williams, which brought some excitement. They're moving to Brooklyn. All the Dwight Howard rumors, which I thought were going to happen. Carmelo Anthony rumors. They miss out on him. The Knicks get a little bit better before the Nets do. Nets slowly build a team with Joe Johnson. They had a good little core there. They fell a little short. They needed a little more depth. Go in on KG, Paul Pierce. We know how that story ends, but luckily enough, they're back now, it seems, at least from a talent perspective. We'll see what happens in the next couple of seasons. Yeah. But yeah, that's my story about watching basketball and becoming a Nets fan.
And was it always a dream of yours to cover, I guess, not just the NBA, but other sports in general? Because I know you mentioned that lightly before, because you realized at a certain point, well, I can't continue playing the sports at a certain level or surpassing the level you were at.
Yeah, so in high school, once I kind of got to that point, I mean, I probably knew a little bit earlier, but in high school, once I realized that obviously playing a sport wasn't a long-term thing, I started to get a little realistic about how can I stay close to sports and maybe pursue a career in this thing. So I got involved with my school's newspaper in high school. And by the time I was a senior, I became the co-editor of the paper. So it was called the Friar Scoreboard. I went to St. Anthony's on Long Island. And same school actually Kenny Atkinson went to, different location at the time, but the same school. So I began writing for them as I became a senior. I became the co-editor. So that was kind of my start in sports writing. And then from that, obviously I went into college and all the stuff I mentioned there, but I wouldn't say that writing or covering the sport was necessarily my initial intent, but I didn't really know. I mean, when you're young, 15, even at this point, 22 years old that I am, you don't know exactly what you're going to end up doing, but you just want to give yourself the best opportunity to do whatever comes available to you. You just keep grinding away and hope for the best.
Exactly. You hit it right there. And I know from at least my personal experiences, you don't know kind of how something's going to work out unless you get experience from it. So when I started sports writing, that's when I kind of found out, okay, I could really pursue a career in this. I'm also in the same boat as you. I am looking into the sports business side of working in a front office, exploring that route of agency work. Mm-hmm. But I do got to ask you kind of, what do you like covering more from your experiences, obviously with NetsDaily covering the Nets and your time with covering the Yankees? Do you like covering baseball more? Do you like covering the NBA and Nets more? Kind of what's your kind of your niche, and how do you which one do you prefer covering, and which one have you had kind of a more memorable time doing?
I've had a lot of experience covering baseball and basketball, as you mentioned. I've also had a little bit of experience covering hockey games, football games. I've done the U.S. Open. I did the U.S. Open for the past 3 straight years. Not this summer, but the 3 years prior than that. So I've done a lot of different things. I'd say that basketball is my favorite to cover just because I don't know. As I've gotten older and older, I've become a bigger and bigger fan of basketball. Like I could watch. Give me what are the worst 2 teams in the league right now? Give me the Hawks and the Grizzlies. Give me a really bad game, okay? And I'd rather watch.
Guys are fun to watch.
I'll give you Hawks and Pelicans.
Fine, Hawks and Pelicans. I love Brandon Ingram, so I could watch that. But like, give me the worst game you could find in the NBA right now, and I'd have a more enjoyable time watching it than a random game in any other sport. Like I just love to watch basketball. I think it's the most exciting thing to watch. There's so many different things to pick apart in terms of strategy and just other stuff too. Like I love how the cap works. I love the different strategy in terms of building a roster and just there's so much that goes into basketball, whereas baseball's kind of a league where they have a soft cap and you get luxury tax penalties, but you can kind of do what you want. There's not really as much of a competitive balance, despite there being a lot of parity from year to year. But then finally, the NBA is just the most star-driven league there is. So it's always fun to follow the stars and and see the stars in action. So I have to say the NBA is definitely my favorite thing to cover, although covering the Yankees was an unbelievable experience. They went to the ALDS the year that I covered them for a full season. So they lost to the Red Sox in that series, but that was a really fun team to cover. But I'd probably lean towards basketball.
Okay. And because you mentioned sports management and basketball being your favorite, and that's likely the area where you would go with sports management, were you ever one of those guys playing 2K and decided to do my GM and that kind of mode? We really took it seriously, not just, playing with, buffing your team per se with settings than just roster moves.
So I mean, I still do on occasion. I don't play as much as I used to, but I don't like my GM because sometimes the players get disgruntled for no reason whatsoever, and then you got to trade them or whatever, and they force their way to play. So I like my league a little better just because you can kind of takes that like stupid part out of it, in my opinion.
Of course.
But when I do play and I am building a league or my league or whatever, I don't just make the best trade I can make for the team. I honestly try and, like, usually I'll play as the Nets. And I'll try and think along with Sean Marks. Would Sean Marks do this move? Because I want to keep it realistic. Like, I want to see how it's going to work. I play the same style. I try and run the same offense. Like, I mean, for me, I like to see it on like in the game first, and that's a luxury. I think a lot of guys have spoken about that. LeBron's spoken about it. D'Lo has spoken about it. Like, some NBA players play the matchup that they're going to play that night right before a game or something, just kind of prep for it. And it's a video game, but they're making it more and more realistic. And you kind of get to see how certain personnel fits with each other and other things of that nature. Obviously, all the contracts are exactly the same as they are in real life. So in terms of trading and stuff like that, it works out. So it's definitely a fun thing to play around with. I wish I could play more than I do right now, like I used to. But yeah, I definitely try and keep it realistic, because if you just play with the trade machine on there, you can get some really unbalanced trades and really build a super team rather quickly.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I also received a lot of, great realism from 2K, because it actually helped me learn the game of basketball much quicker, because I didn't do the normal route of playing a sport or watching young, even though my dad did in the background. I picked up 2K, I think 13, and quickly got the hype of Brooklyn Nets and, played through there, and you wouldn't even know that I'm just average Joe in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but whereas back in the day, I think across sports, people kind of learn personnel by cards or whatever. I think nowadays most people kind of learn the sport, or at least the players on teams, by playing video games. And that's how I would say that.
I agree with that.
Wrong or right, you say?
Nah, I definitely agree. It's good enough.
Well, I agree with that completely.
Like for me, like I always I knew my team that I watched and the stars of the league, but I think in terms of knowing rosters top to bottom, I mean, video games are great for that nowadays, and I think a lot of kids grow up and learn the game that way.
Yeah, realism's still hit or miss, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a perfect system to integrate oneself. And then one more thing before we talk about the NBA today. Chris and I enjoyed asking Scotto this, but what NBA player or players do you most emulate, that your player comparison? What's your player comparison?
When I play basketball?
Yeah.
When I play basketball? Well, it depends. Am I having a good shooting day or not? Because that could really change things.
When I'm like the top tier, you're balling right now.
When I'm at my best.
Yeah.
So I'll give you my scouting report. I'd say that I'm a very smart player when I play. I'm about, like, I'd say I'm just under 6'1" in height, about 175. So just giving you my physical profile there. But yeah, so that's my physical profile. I'd say I'm an off guard. I could be a secondary playmaker. Smart in the pick and roll, will usually make the right play. I'd say my athletic ability, I can move, I could do different things. I'm not going to be the most athletic guy in the court. Despite my height, I cannot dunk, unfortunately. But I'm going to make the smart play on the floor. I'm kind of a good catch and shoot off-ball shooter. When I'm going, I can make a handful of them, but when I'm off, my mechanics get screwed up. So, but I'd say you throw me out there in an open run, I'll be able to handle myself. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to have the ball in his hand scoring the entire time, but I'll be a good complementary player. Think Joe Harris if he was an average shooter instead of an elite shooter.
So an average Joe?
An average Joe. I think I could handle the ball in the pick and roll a little better than Joe Harris. Not obviously better than Joe Harris, but in comparison to the competition I'm playing. Smart defender like Joe Harris. Maybe not the best defender, but a smart defender. I'll contest. I'll stay in front. I'm going to say smart player. will play a good, well-rounded game, won't take it over in any fashion, but someone that's good is a third option on the floor.
All right, I respect
I like
that.
it.
So I guess Kenny will keep an eye on you. If you ever have that high school talk, look at the look at the tape.
Yeah, we gotta get that Friar focused. I gotta talk to Kenny about that.
You get that get that alumnus photo.
Yep.
All right, so let's kick it into high gear, bring it to the NBA today. Current state of the Nets.
Yeah, so what do we got? 2 losses in a row, 2 tough losses. The Knicks, that was the worst game of the season.
A horrible trip to go.
I mean, shooting under 30%, mid-20s from overall. Just an absolutely terrible game from the Nets. And then they go to Houston, come out in the first quarter looking like more of the same against much tougher competition on the road. I thought that game was heading towards a 150, 100 final score, something like that. Luckily, the Nets turned it around. They kept it competitive. They grinded their way back, actually took the lead in the fourth quarter before ultimately losing. But yeah, I'm okay with that loss. You know, you're on the road. The Rockets are a good team. They already beat them up in Brooklyn. So it's tough to win both games of a season series against a good team. So I'm okay with that loss. You wish you didn't come out so poorly in the beginning, but you'll take that loss. Some guys played well. Dinwiddie did not play well, but the rest of the team, I'd say some of the role players, guys off the bench like Theo Pinson, they surprised and played well. The games that frustrate you are the games like against the Knicks. I mean, it's going to happen. You're not going to shoot well, but to shoot that poorly and just seem to be taken out of your game so easily by a really bad team, I mean, that's a good excuse. But yeah, eggnog or not, you got to be able to compete better with the Knicks. So that was not an encouraging loss, but 16-15, they just need to get their guys back. And we've been hearing Caris LeVert's on the mend now for a week or two. He's had his brace off. He's been shooting. He's back to practice, full contact. But they're saying he's just trying to get his legs back now. For me, this team needs Caris LeVert. If it was a lower body injury, I'd say, okay, be cautious with him. You don't want to rush him back. But the fact that it's his thumb, if he's working his legs back, he's only going to be, let's play him 15, 20 minutes a game off the bench, work his legs back for a few games. He'll be back. I mean, they need him out there right now. And I think they're being a little overcautious with LeVert, given that it was only a thumb injury. So, I don't know. I think he'll be back within the next few games, but he's been ruled out already for the game against Minnesota on Monday night. So we'll see what happens there. Kyrie, who knows about that? That's a real question mark right there, but you hope for the best there.
Definitely. And do you expect them to make any trades up in February, or do you think they're going to stay pat? Or, you know, if they make a trade, what do you think they look for?
I think they're going to stay relatively the way they are. I don't think they're going to make any big moves with Kevin Durant out for at least through the trade deadline. Who knows if he comes back at the end of the year, but they're going to want to see what this team looks like with KD before moving any core pieces. I could see a move or two in the back end of the roster, maybe cutting someone to sign a player that gets bought out, or a two-way guy, or a 10-day contract of some sort. Like, I can see a little bit of movement in the back end of the roster, or maybe for a trade for someone, but no one that's really going to shake up the roster too much. Sean Marks really hasn't made too many in-season trades since coming here. I think Dante Cunningham might be the only one that he's done. So I think he did Jaleel Okafor, right? But Dante Cunningham was the only one at the deadline. But he really doesn't make a lot of moves in season. So I'd be surprised if they did anything, especially considering the status of KD. But who knows? Sean Marks has surprised us before.
No, of course, because the big thing is with ball handling, you don't think that many more games. So Caris comes back, so you don't really need to look there. But one of the things, I mean, from my perspective, is you lose Nwaba and you already cut Shump, so that it's kind of a potential filler that needs, you know, extra attention from my perspective. So I don't know. I mean, I would hate to waive Nwaba, but
I mean, you have to waive Nwaba. You're not.
Yeah, from a basketball decision, there's no.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm even surprised they haven't done it by now.
I'm surprised they haven't done it yet either. And because I just think what's going to happen is that they're just going to cut Nwaba, then they're probably, what I think is going to sign TLC to a standard deal, and then look at their 10 days.
I agree with that, Chris. I don't think that's the move they should do, but given how often they're playing TLC as a part of their rotation, and his games are going to start to run out, I think that they're going to reward him with a full contract, similar to how they did to Theo Pinson at the end of last season. But if I'm the Nets, you need more bodies. Moving TLC from a two-way to a main contract only allows you to add another two-way, which is that player really going to be playing for you? Probably not.
Probably not.
So I would keep TLC as a two-way for now. Increase your flexibility. Sign maybe Shumpert back or bring someone else in that could really contribute at this point. And then you have TLC and Shumpert to play or someone else. So rather than being only one. So I think they need another player out there. And I agree. I think they're going to do what you're saying, but I think they should do something else.
All right. And then just two more quick follow-ups. Where do you expect the Nets to land in the playoffs? And do you expect KD to make a surprise appearance?
Well, this is so hard to do without
knowing
what happens with KD, even Kyrie at this point. But I'd say the top 6 teams in front of them, they're kind of pulling away a little bit. I think they have maybe a 4-game lead over the Nets, the 6th seed Raptors, I believe, at this point. So I think the Nets could definitely catch them. They get Karras, Kyrie back. Who knows KD at the end of the season? I think KD coming back is going to largely depend on, one, they're going to give KD the option. I expect him to be cleared around March, maybe the beginning of March, and they're going to give KD the option, come back when you want. If you want to come back this season, you come back. It's also going to largely depend on where the Nets are in the playoff race. If they think that adding a Kevin Durant and Kyrie's back healthy and they're playing well, if adding Kevin Durant puts them over the hump and really puts them in the title consideration this season, then I think it's something they're really going to have to consider bringing him back, and I think KD would want to come back. If they're kind of struggling, Kyrie's dealing with injuries still, and they're middling around 500, will they bring KD back? I'm not sure if it's the right move because I still think they'd be a couple pieces away from championship at that point. So We'll see what happens. If you had to hold me to it right now, I'd probably say KD does come back about mid-March, plays the final 10 games of the season, resting here and there, maybe plays about 20, 25 minutes a night, maybe averages 15 to 18 points. He'll give you good production. But I don't know. I'd say I'll give you 2 options. So if KD doesn't come back, I'm assuming Kyrie comes back within the next few weeks. If KD doesn't come back, I think the Nets finish about 7th where they are right now, about 45 wins, and they're first round out. If KD does come back, I could see them pushing towards 5 or 6, 5, 6 or 7. But either way, no one's going to want to play this team in the playoffs. And I think the only 2 teams that the Nets probably would definitely lose to in the first round would be the Bucks and be the Sixers, with KD or not. I think unless KD comes back setting the world on fire when he initially comes back, the first year back, honestly, like a month after coming back, it would be tough to beat one of those 2 teams, in my opinion. But Boston, I think they match it well with Boston even without KD. I would not be surprised to see them win that series. Toronto would be a tough one just because of the size of Toronto, but I think they can compete with them. Indiana is a tough matchup. I don't know if they beat them. Miami, I think they can compete with. Miami's playing really well. I love Eric Spoelstra as a coach, so that'd be tough. But they can compete with all these teams besides Philadelphia.
That's all you really want in the end.
And Milwaukee. So if the Nets can get top 6 or whatever, I mean, I don't know if the Sixers are even going to get up to the 2 seed. We'll see what happens. But you got to try and avoid Philadelphia and Milwaukee to give yourself a shot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more on those because Milwaukee and Philly are the 2 teams that the Nets are really going to have trouble with in the playoffs, especially with size and obviously Giannis. What he has done to the Nets mostly in their recent matchups is just enormous. But I know, Billy, to kind of just piggyback off that question that Doug just asked, I know earlier in the season, I believe in the roundtable discussion that we did with Nets Daily before the season started, you picked Taurean Prince to be kind of your secret weapon. I think that was your player. So can you just talk about kind of who do you think or what player, or if there is a player that's going to be kind of an X factor for this Nets team in the second half of the season?
An X factor. I mean, I'm not going to give you the easy cop out of Kyrie or Karras. You know how important they are. But Kyrie's health honestly is the X factor, but I'll try and give you someone else. Let me think. Might be Taurean Prince again, in my opinion, because if without KD or until KD comes back, I mean, he's really your only scoring option from a forward position in terms of a real 4-5 scorer. I mean, the other guys, Jared Allen, DeAndre Jordan, they're getting dunks and dump offs, but they're not really creating offense or really stretching the floor. Like, he's really the only guy you have from that position. He's rare to what the Nets have on their roster. So we see how much of a better team they are this season when he's hitting shots. He played well against Houston last night. He still has some boneheaded decision-making every once in a while. I don't love his shot selection. His motor's kind of inconsistent. But when he makes the right play, he stays within his role, which I think will continue to improve once KD, Karras, and Kyrie are back. I think he's an effective player. I do wonder, though, and I've been saying this a little bit to a few people as of late. Not everyone agrees with me, but just looking at the structure of his contract, he's got a 2-year extension at about $14 million a year. That to me just screams potential trade piece. I mean, for me, they got him back in the Crabbe trade because they were willing to give up 1 first rounder for Alan Crabbe, dumping him. But the Hawks said we need a little bit more. But they said, okay, we'll give you another one, but you got to give us something back. So they give us Taurean Prince. He kind of fits the system. He kind of subs for KD this year, playing that position. But once KD comes back, I mean, I don't know how much room you have in the rotation to give Taurean Prince 25-plus minutes a game because especially he's not going to really finish games unless he's playing really, really well. You're not going to be able to fit Kyrie, Karras, Spencer, Joe, KD, Taurean. Like, even if you go really, really small at KD at the 5, it's tough to fit him in there. So, to me, the way his contract structured just 2 years after this one, he's not under contract for the final year of the KD Kyrie era, assuming they don't opt out. So I think that kind of gives, just trying to think like through the tea leaves here, I think that might make him a potential expendable piece. 14-15 million, you can get a good player in here in combination with a couple other contracts. You can get up to about a $20 million salary, and you don't really have to move any of the real core pieces. So, I mean, you could end up moving a guy like Karras for maybe a Bradley Beal or another star like that. But if you want to keep those guys, you could move Taurean Prince, and he's rather expendable. And given his contract, you can get a good player in return if you had some picks and young players. So I'd keep an eye on that moving forward. But he, as I said, he's just so important to the team right now because he's something they don't really have, and he needs to shoot well for them to really have some offensive success because that team's offensive rating continues to plummet. I believe they're down to 23rd in the league now in offensive rating, which they were top 5 when Kyrie was playing. So they're really slipping in that regard. Defensively, they've gotten a lot better. They're now 13th in the league, which is similar to their mark of last season. So they got to kind of balance that out once Kyrie and Karras come back.
Definitely understand that.
Yeah, because you took the words right out of my mouth. Because I was going to say, because Taurean Prince is going to be like was mine, like you, for example. I was going to say the X factor is obviously how healthy, if Kyrie Irving can stay healthy, and kind of mostly his timetable and see when is he going to come back, the impact he's going to make. Obviously, that's the clear X factor. But you took the words right out of my mouth with obviously Taurean. I was going to mention his contract and kind of what do you see moving forward with that. So I can't agree with you more. I agree with that. And despite talking a little about Nets, we got to move to the other team in New York. So, Billy, next let's just hop right into it and talk about the Knicks. They're sitting at 9-24 right now. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games, I guess you could say. What are the bright spots looking for this team moving forward? Do you see them making any moves at the trade deadline? What do you think the future holds for the Knickerbockers?
Yeah, I really like how Mike Miller's kind of instilled his vision onto the team. I think they're starting to find their core group of players in terms of who they want to finish games with. Elfrid Payton's really been a big help for them in kind of setting the table for their offense and their defense, being a leader on the floor for them. So he's kind of gotten more minutes as Mike Miller's come along here. He's been good for them. Julius Randle is playing unbelievable basketball right now. I think he scored 30 points in consecutive games, few in a row. And here, I think he had 16 rebounds, 6 assists last night. The Knicks, as you mentioned, 5-5 in their last 10, and that's more of the team I expected them to be this season. I expect them to be in kind of that 10 to 12 range, around 30 wins. So they're kind of playing about that pace right now if they continue this. So I kind of like the direction they're moving in. Mitchell Robinson has kind of refound himself in the player he looked like last season. He's just dominating the paint. He's not going to really show his impact in the stats all the time, but you see how he affects the game. When the Nets played them the other day, Spencer Dinwiddie and the rest of the Nets were just completely deterred from going anywhere near the paint. They dribble in and then have to look for someone to kick it out to just because Mitchell Robinson's presence. So even when he doesn't get a block, just the thought of him being in the paint is huge for the Knicks. RJ Barrett still promising, taking a little bit of time to develop as expected, at least on my end here. But I think he could still be a promising player. Kevin Knox, I am still high on. I liked him coming out of the draft. I just think he's being misused with the Knicks. I think he should be more of a stretch 4 type and kind of like Brandon Ingram in New Orleans and kind of be used to take advantage of other 4's athleticism and kind of 1-2 dribbles to the rim should be his game, not someone that's playing out on the perimeter trying to conduct a pick and roll. So I kind of think he's someone that's being misused. I'd like to see him kind of flourish in a different way. But Marcus Morris has been great for them this season. I could see him being a guy they move at the deadline, but they have some bloated 1 or 2 year contracts. So it's difficult to kind of find matching salaries around the league without teams giving up important pieces in their rotation. So we'll see what happens there. I think shooters like Wayne Ellington, Reggie Bullock, they can maybe get you a second round pick back. They have a little bit of a smaller salary. Marcus Morris, I would honestly keep unless I got a first round pick for him. That would be my stance on him. Julius Randle, he's turned himself around. I think he's a young enough piece that you want to see what he has for the next few years. He could be someone that knocks on the doorstep of an all-star berth in the next few years. So the Knicks are moving in the right direction, but they got to have patience. I think Mike Miller might be the right man for the job. I said it from when Fizdale was fired. I thought he was the only guy on the staff that had the potential to be that guy long-term for the Knicks. And he comes from a development background with the Spurs, coming from the G League, kind of similar path as Nick Nurse, the Raptors head coach who won a championship last season, similar path that he took. So I like the demeanor of Mike Miller on the sideline. He's confident, but he's composed. He kind of deals with the media well, in my opinion. So I think Mike Miller could be the guy there, but the Knicks just got to trust it. They got to trust the process, for lack of a better term, and continue to mow away at this. It's not going to be easy to get out of this, but continue to develop the young players, progress without kind of taking all the outside distractions in and looking for the big names. And that report the other day being leaked about Karl Anthony Towns, that's not where the Knicks should be at this point. That's just not what they should be doing. You remember the Nets in the early stages of their rebuild, they had cap space, and Sean Marks was like, yeah, we're not ready. We're not going to be going for stars. We're not at that point. And he signed placeholder veterans, kind of like the Knicks did, but culture guys. And he absorbed bad contracts for picks, and that's kind of how he did it. And he waited a few years to build this thing up, and then the Nets were finally ready to bring those star players on, and he took full advantage of it. The Knicks have to kind of do the same thing for the next year or two, really build the core, build from the ground up. Hopefully you find your coach, your core young pieces in that time, and then you put yourself in position to then pounce for that star.
I agree with you on that. And then to transition a little bit, obviously NBA All-Star weekend's approaching slowly. So, Billy, let me hear your all-star predictions. Just some players. You don't have to name out any starting lineups or anything, but kind of some players to keep an eye on. Some surprise players that you could see maybe becoming all-stars.
Yeah, so let's look down the standings because that's usually how it works. So Giannis is definitely in for the Bucks. He's going to be voted in, maybe be the leading vote getter in the Eastern Conference. He gets to choose his team once again. Jimmy Butler is a lock for the Heat. Kemba Walker, he's a lock. Pascal Siakam, he's a lock. This is all barring injury, of course. But so that's 4 guys right there. I'm just going down the list here. Joel Embiid, he's a lock. Then you go down a little bit more. I think those are the 5 locks right there in the Eastern Conference. And then you have second All-Stars, which is largely going to depend on the standings at that point. So you can go Chris Middleton with the Bucks, Bam Adebayo with the Heat. I think Jaylen Brown over Jason Tatum as the second star for the Celtics. Kyle Lowry's an option for the Raptors. Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, options for the Sixers. I think the Pacers need a representative. I would lean Brogdon over Sabonis at this point, but either one I'd be fine with. The Nets, I think they need a representative too, and with Kyrie Irving likely not making it because he just has not played enough, I think Spencer Dinwiddie is that guy. So I think Spencer Dinwiddie deserves a spot. And then you look down a little bit more, you have some guys on bad teams that are just putting up unreal numbers. So you got Trae Young. He just got hurt the other night. We'll see what his status is, but I don't think it's too serious. But he's averaging 29 points a game. I think 8.5, 9 assists per game. So those numbers are unreal. I'd put him on the team despite the Hawks losing. Bradley Beal's kind of in that same boat. And then you got Andre Drummond. He's putting up good numbers, but they're not really a good team. Nikola Vucevic, Evan Fournier, they're playing pretty well for the Magic. So there's a few guys kind of involved. I tweeted it out the other day if I could find the tweet, but I think ultimately those are the guys kind of in consideration. I don't know about you guys, if there's anyone I left out.
No, I agree with that because obviously the All-Star votings, a lot of people realized over the years it's based off a lot about standings and having a representative, at least one from each team. So the names that you mentioned, obviously, I agree with them. I think you hit it spot on. And those, if I had to list out my All-Stars, I think there would be I would say just about everyone just that you named, honestly.
Yeah,
Yep.
And I think as long as Dinwiddie keeps his production, even with the return of Karras and hopefully Kyrie, I honestly think, well, not a lock, but we'll see. If he keeps the pace, then he'll be a lock, in my opinion. So it all depends on the return.
Sorry to cut you off, though. And then to go in the West, I mean, obviously LeBron and AD, they're both in there. Jokic is in there. Harden's in there. So that is 4 right there. Luka's in it. That's 5. I think Kawhi and PG are both in it. That's 7. You're going to get at least 1 from the Jazz. I think Mitchell over Gobert this year for me. So it's 8. Then Damian Lillard's in. That's 9. So you have 9, I think, relative locks in the Western Conference. 3 more spots, which are going to be between Russell Westbrook. I think you'll see Rudy Gobert in that mix. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will be in that mix. I think you'll think about Devin Booker, who their team's a little more competitive this year. His stats kind of in that same boat as Bradley Beal and Trae Young, just really good. Karl-Anthony Towns, another one. He's a lock for me. So you got 10 locks and 2 spots open. For me, Brandon Ingram's another guy playing really well, but I don't think he's a year off. So for me, the final 2 spots I'd probably go with Devin Booker and Russell Westbrook in the final spots. But so that would be LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Luka Doncic, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, Devin Booker, and Karl-Anthony Towns.
Should be fun. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because I've been saying this all along. Devin Booker is like that player that he's like your player that hasn't been an all-star, but easily the most talented player in the NBA without having that tack on his resume.
Yeah,
Devin Booker. I've been a fan of him since he was in Kentucky. Obviously, he didn't have as big of a role as in Kentucky because of the roster that was there. But just to see his development over the years and what he's doing in Phoenix, obviously, if it was with any other team, it may get some more notability. If it was a more winning team, put in those words. But he's one of the most exciting players that have yet to be an all-star, and I think that this is his year. So I have to agree with that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Damian Lillard, and Steph Curry, Darren Williams, even those 3 guys. I remember off the top of my head of being guys that were just right on the doorstep every year that just somehow fell short in the beginning of their careers before finally getting into that perennial all-star territory. But Devin Booker is definitely going to be one of those guys for the future. Unbelievably talented, one of my favorite players to watch in the league. And I think this year his stats just can't be denied. He missed a little bit of time, but I think he still should definitely get in there.
Well, great to hear it. So before we officially wrap things up, just wanted to know who you think's coming out of the East, who's coming out of the West, and who's winning it all.
Okay, so out of the East, I think I'm still going to go with Giannis and the Bucks right now. As bad as they looked against the 76ers on Christmas, I think that's the only team that could beat them in a series. So as long as they don't get matched up with the Sixers, I think it's going to be the Bucks out of the East. And in the West, I'm going to go with the Clippers, as I picked in the preseason. I think they're the best team top to bottom. Preseason, I did pick Clippers-Sixers, so with the Clippers winning it. So I got Bucks over Sixers right now because the Sixers kind of have struggled a little bit. They're at the 5 seed. So if the Sixers cannot get to playing the Bucks in the playoffs, I think the Bucks are going to go all the way to the finals. But I'll say Clippers over Bucks for now. I had Clippers over Sixers before the season.
That's great. And then, Billy, before we let you go, I got to ask one more question. So obviously the decade's nearing, the all-decade predictions and the official teams have been out. So looking into the 2020s, what players do you see running the NBA in 2020? The young talents that are going to be possible candidates and members of the 2020 decade team.
This is a fun one. I'm going to give you 10 guys. Let's think of like all first team and all second team. Okay?
All right.
I'm not going to give you positions because that's too hard to think about at the moment. But just looking down the rosters, I'm going to say Jokic is 1. Anthony Davis is another one. 2. Doncic, 3. Who else we got? I'm going to say Devin Booker, 4. Karl-Anthony Towns, 5. Brandon Ingram, 6. There's too many guys. There's a lot of good players.
There's a lot of guys. I know, like John Morant's.
I didn't even say De'Aaron Fox, D'Angelo Russell, John Morant, Zion Williamson, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Pascal Siakam, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. I mean, there are so many guys here. I'm just looking up and down the rosters here. Trae Young. There's so many good young players. I'll stick with my top 10. Let's go to the top 10. So now that I've looked up and down. I think Tatum, Siakam, Simmons, Embiid. So what is that, 4? 4 right there. Trae Young, 5. So that's my 5 in the East as of now.
Mm-hmm.
In the West, I will go with Cat, Booker. That's 1, 2. Doncic 3, Jokic 4, and then AD, are we still counting him as young, but 5, and then guys right on the precipice is De'Aaron Fox, D'Angelo Russell, Zion, we'll see what he is, and John Moran, I'd say.
What about Giannis?
Oh, Giannis. It's so weird. He's won an MVP already. I don't really consider him young, but yeah, he is very young still.
Exactly. It's too early to tell, obviously. The year didn't even start yet, and obviously there's James Wiseman that's coming in. Everyone's talking about him. You never know who the heck's coming out of future drafts. But the players you name that are currently in the NBA, I completely agree. Those are players on my radar as well for that all-decade team.
My favorite young players, though, a couple of them. I gotta just say off the top of my head.
Okay, throw them in.
Okay, so I love Luka. Obviously, everyone loves Luka. Who doesn't love Luka? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I love the way he plays. I think he's like a more talented, younger version of Karis LeVert without the durability issues. Reminds me of him in a lot of ways. Really smart player the way he plays the game. I love D'Lo. Always will have love for D'Lo, but D'Lo is one of those guys. Jaren Jackson Jr. is someone I really like. John Moran as well. Brandon Ingram, big fan of his. I like Tatum and Brown. Jaylen Brown I like even better. I don't know if he'll be a better player long term, but he's a better player right now. Then I think we'll stop right there. Eastern Conference is kind of not the best spot right now.
Yeah, I feel that. But hey, Billy, we thank you again for joining us on this night. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your Monday to talk to Doug and I. Doug, you got any closing remarks?
Yeah, so remember, guys, feel free to email over any suggestions, questions, comments, or thoughts on any of our content by sending an email to wingspanpodcast@gmail.com. And do not forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram accounts, and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening service. As for next time, stay classy, take care.